Isabel, I want you to meet Jean and David Martin. Isabel Flagg.
Hello, Isabel.
Hi. They just moved in today.
Oh, just the two of you? So far, but we're hoping.
Oh, this is a great place to raise children.
Can I help you, Betty?
Sure, you can help set the table.
Come on, let me get you guys a real drink.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Josh Oppenheimer, who is the co-founder and CEO of Transformative AI.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
So you're an emergency room physician. I mean, aren't you busy enough? How and why are you actually also running a startup?
Yeah, it's a combination that keeps me busy, but it's also a couple of careers that really feed into each other. So, every shift that I have in the emergency room, I am taking care of patients and thinking both about what we can do today, given the current situation, as well as what would I wish that we could do if we had the better technology or if we had earlier action to be able to intervene earlier for a patient. So have the opportunity to then be able to take some of those thoughts and then actually try to bring them to fruition as part of a team of machine learning researchers and other amazing experts. It's been really exciting to be able to try to actually solve some of those problems.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this conversation is that many startups, I think, start out really more on the technology side. They're technologists, they're researchers, scientists, and they create a functional product and then look for market fit. Here, you know exactly what the pain points are. This is your world, you live it inside and out. And really, you provide, in many ways, a product requirements document or the detailed feature set. So it's very interesting because you bring a perspective beyond just simply technology development. I wanted to ask you, just on a personal level, there was some mention about cardiac arrest having some sort of personal effect on you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So that primarily comes down to the care that I provide to patients. I've had the personal experience of having an alarm go off and literally running down the halls of a hospital to reach a patient's room and find a nurse who's providing CPR and another nurse who's running off to get the defibrillator. And we're sort of trying to do everything we can to give the patient the best chance, but we're really behind the 8 ball. And some of those situations we've had a fortunate outcome, but far too often I've had to then call a patient's loved one and tell them that it was too late and that they're gone. And so to have the opportunity to get to know some of those families and to be able to meet so many people along the journey who have in turn told me that they too have an experience of losing a father or a brother or a friend. It's something where there's a really human need to be able to solve this problem, and it's something that drives a lot of people who have been supporting us to try to move this as quickly as possible to market.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us. I think sometimes, some people get kind of desensitized in the sense of, we just assume that because you're a physician, you're in the emergency room, this is something that just happens, on an everyday basis. But the fact that you can actually make a difference and to prevent and mitigate some of these unnecessary deaths, it becomes very important. So to that end, what is Transformative and how are you guys looking to address some of these problems?
Yeah. So Transformative is a team of clinicians, machine learning researchers, medical engineers who are coming together to try to bring predictive technologies into healthcare. Our first product predicts sudden cardiac arrest, and we do that by taking the EKG data that's already being collected for patients in hospitals around the world And we take that same electrical data from the heart, but analyze it to predict when a patient will have a cardiac arrest. Today, those monitors only issue alarms after an event has occurred. And with our machine learning alerts, we will be able to issue alerts 60 minutes in advance.
So I guess the immediate question that I have for you is, there are other startups that's working in a similar space as far as prediction. Can you talk about a little bit around your IP that you can share as to how your algorithms and the way you guys process these EKG signals makes it unique and increases the confidence level of your predictions?
Absolutely. So we're protecting our IP in two ways. One is we do have some trade secrets based on the experience of my colleagues. One of my co-founders was previously a particle physicist at CERN, where he was working at the Large Hadron Collider to measure the W boson and the Higgs boson, making headlines a few years ago. And one of my other co-founders is a computer science professor who previously was on a team at SwiftKey that developed a predictive typing app that they sold to Microsoft. And so some of the insights that they've brought to this cardiac arrest problem have been insights that we've kept as trade secrets, and others we are patenting. We have our first family of patents that was granted earlier this year, and we have some additional patents working through the pipeline. And so we will have the opportunity to be able to defend this IP. And in terms of what makes us different from some of the competitors in this space, a lot of it comes down to the actual data that we're analyzing and our approach to doing so. So one of the best known companies that's operating in this area is Epic. And what they do is they've worked with some hospitals to try to take all of the data from a patient's electronic medical record and identify when a patient is at high risk of decompensating. And that can work pretty well. They have some decent results, but it also means that you have to do a custom integration for each hospital you go to make sure that all the data is optimized for that setting. And the nice thing about our approach is that we just have such a simple data input. We just take the data that's already being collected by the patient monitor, and by analyzing those waveforms using the computer eye, we're able to identify when a patient is having these events by analyzing just a very small sliver of that data that's in a patient's electronic record. And that allows us to be able to, in turn, scale to other future customers much more easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Now, tell us about your data sources and how, because again, at the end of the day, it's about pattern recognition. So how did you develop the initial set of algorithms, but then what is going to be in terms of the product development roadmap to enhance those algorithms further as you guys mature into a larger organization?
So you're absolutely right that the data is key for any machine learning company. And one of the things that surprised me personally when I started out is that I figured that hospitals were sitting on this data and that patient monitoring companies were sitting on these data, and that we could just reach out to some of these folks and get access to some of the data that they already had in their systems through some sort of partnership and start moving. And it turns out that these data don't really exist in a nice, neat place for companies to be able to access them. So there's a lot of memory, a lot of storage required to keep the entire waveform from a patient's hospital stay. And so what hospitals do today is that they generally just delete that data, they overwrite it after 72 hours. And that means that all of the insights that you might be able to generate from that are evaporating with that overwriting. So what we've had to do is we started with some publicly available databases that provided a start. And then we've had to work with hospitals on a prospective data to partner with them to collect and store some of this data so that we'd be able to go back and analyze it. At this point, we have data from thousands of patients, and we've also analyzed the data from patients in North America, Europe, and Asia, and having that diversity geographically also gives us more confidence that it will be applicable to patients in more and more places.
Now, I know right now it sounds like you guys are primarily focused on EKG data, but I got to believe that you guys will want to add additional modalities or different data types. And similarly to the example that you're giving here, some of these hospitals may also be, removing or deleting these other data types. What's your plan to expand there and also increase the robustness of a multimodal approach?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that the more data that you're able to bring into the algorithm, you are able to have some additional returns. The best example of that is that if you take the respiratory data from a patient monitor and add that on to the cardiac data, that gives you better precision when predicting cardiac events. So we are in the process of incorporating some of these additional data pieces into our algorithm to increase the robustness. At the same time, we see huge advantages in having a core algorithm that achieves clinical grade results without having to add in additional data sources, because that means that as we think to reaching more and more hospitals, and especially extending outside the United States and Europe to lower resource settings, the simpler we're able to keep the data collection, the more patients we'll be able to reach. And also, as we look to extend out of the hospital to patients who are being monitored at home, the simpler we can keep the monitoring again, the easier we'll be able to expand.
So on the clinical side, have you guys already have done or plan to pursue clinical studies and really prove out, in fact, that your algorithms are superior? So, for example, there's a startup in South Korea that is working on medical imaging, and part of the reason they've become a massive market leader in their space is because of just repeated clinical studies that consistently prove that their approach is superior to all the rivals in competition.
So you're absolutely right that generating clinical data to prove out your claims is really the key to being able to get interest from hospitals and purchasers. And at this point, all of the analyses we've done have been simulated. So we have taken data from hospitals, run it through our algorithms, and been able to simulate when our alarms would have gone off if our systems were running live. But the next stage is really to do those prospective trials where our hospital partners are running our systems in real time. And at this point, we have those trials that are being designed, and we have some of the partners who have come on board, and we're sort of marching through the various approvals that you need to get. We're also trying to line up some additional grant funding to support that. So that's absolutely part of our plan at this point.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask a very kind of simple question, which is, what you guys are working on is such a no-brainer in the sense of, we need to save more lives. But I wonder what's been the receptivity from the hospital and the ecosystem, especially those that are paying for the enterprise package.
Yeah. So one of the pivots that we've made over the last couple of years was really trying to better solve that business challenge. I was excited about this as a no-brainer as a clinician from day one, but thinking through how do we actually coordinate with all the stakeholders within a hospital and health system creates more nuance. So what we've ultimately settled on is that rather than selling our software directly to hospitals, we're going to partner with the patient monitoring companies to integrate our analytics into their devices so that from the hospital's perspective, they're just upgrading from the current version of monitoring to the next generation of predictive monitoring, but they still get to work with the same large companies that they're accustomed to, and they're able to just upgrade from 1 year to the next. That will make things a lot easier for all the procurement professionals within hospitals and all the folks who are part of those longer sales cycles.
Yeah, it's a beautiful strategy because otherwise, it becomes a one-to-many situation where you're trying to penetrate into tens of thousands of hospitals. Here, it's just a handful of key manufacturers that have significant market share, and if you can penetrate and have a licensing agreement, it allows for you to have incredible distribution. And of course, access because they're already incumbents in those hospital settings. What has been the receptivity of some of these manufacturers, and do you already have partnerships that you've already announced?
Yeah, so We are in conversation with all the leading patient monitoring companies at this point. We don't have any announcements that are official, but we're currently going through the technical due diligence and the commercial due diligence within these organizations. And one of the challenges is that these are huge organizations. Even the companies that have relatively small share are still global, many billion-dollar companies. And so just as there are many stakeholders within a hospital who would need to sign off, there are many stakeholders within these device manufacturers. And so we're just sort of systematically going through the process of having conversations with people from regulatory, from sales, from the clinical side, from the algorithm side. And we're trying to prove ourselves to each and every one of those people that we're going to fit into their ecosystems.
Right. It's a long cycle. And of course, this is again where the clinical studies come in to help buttress your case. Now, one organizational question that I have is, I know that you, until more recently, were really the chief medical officer within the organization and have since become the CEO. Is that something that you can talk a little bit about?
Certainly. So when we started this company, I was actually early on in my emergency medicine residency. And at that point, I was working 60, 80-hour weeks in the hospital. And the engagement with the company was in my bits and pieces of time off. And then it was actually just this June that I graduated from residency. At this point, I'm working as an attending emergency medicine physician, but as a part-time basis. And that means that I've had a lot more time to put into the company. Simultaneously, one of my co-founders, who had been our CEO from the beginning and had been working on us full-time from the beginning, his sort of more natural fit had always been to be more focused on the technical end. And so he was eager to be able to transition over to our chief technology officer once I had the bandwidth to join full-time.
Good. Well, you can tell you've completed your residency because you look a little bit more rested.
Exactly.
Well, any last comment that you want to share with the listeners?
So I just encourage everyone who is thinking about ideas for businesses they're considering starting to just go for it, to have conversations with as many stakeholders as they can, and to try to figure out what it would take to bring their ideas to the market. As a person who had an idea for a clinical device that I wished were out there, I knew that I personally wouldn't be able to bring that technology to the world. I don't know anything about coding, but by being able to partner with people with diverse skill sets, we've been able to form a team that has a real chance at bringing this to the future. So, I would just encourage folks to go for it and to figure out how to bring together the teams to bring these solutions to reality.
So with that, I've been joined by Josh Oppenheimer, who is the co-founder and CEO of Transformative AI. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.